So this is the point at which we open the floor for questions.
I'm talking now about the 21st century and where we go in the next steps, you know, and we have to sing about that. And that's why I'm saying that we, a group of us are advocating something called creative insurgencies. And in the music, we gave a document, as Vibert's excellent presentation, you know, led us into through the ages. We start a new sort of 21st century revolution, you know, creative insurgencies. And I'd like to recognize Vanilla. Okay?
So would I. Big up Vanilla.
Vanilla is doing phenomenal work. Vanilla is part of that new wave, coming, you know, at the end of the 20th century, when the technology revolution came in, and the opening of all those new studios, Vision Sound, Brutal Tracks, and Cross Color. Now, what Vanilla is doing, her last mastermind piece that's called Rage. You know, Rage is just one of the slickest music videos that came out for the season. So,
Remember everything. You see that corner that you mentioned, Robin Wellington? That is where Sparrow learned his art, the Calypso king of the world. The Trinidadians would come here to test their music at that corner, and when they say, you are go Tonga boy, then they go back to Trinidad and Tobago, and when Mrs. Roth's father's here in Chicago, go back and win something, and he went with Gina and Dinah, Rosita and Clementina, when the Americans left. And I really want to pay a tribute to what that corner there by Freedom House and the Shaw Place did for Calypso in this world. Thank you.
And there's a bigger story to Trinidad and Guyana and Calypso. A long story. And you got to go right back to Bill Rogers, because Bill Rogers is recognized as the impresario that brought Enchanter, the Trinidadian Enchanter, to Guyana. Because by the 1930s, 1940s, as you got these hinterland locations, your Barticas and your Kurokums and whatever, these workers, they needed entertainment. So the vaudeville person, you know, that's part of their circuit. So Bill Rogers begins to bring Trinidadian Calypsonians on that circuit. Because remember, Trinidad is a Roman Catholic country primarily, and after Carnival, where do you work? So Guyana was a very important stop, a point in that post-Carnival circuit. As Sparrow said, and I think Alan, you wrote a very nice piece on Sparrow, is that Cyril Shaw blooded him. He got to understand what it meant to be able to tour, right? You know, to sing in Rice Bond, you know. So absolutely, you know, absolutely. Yes.
You have a mic over here. Very nice hand. Stop quickly. Oh, sorry. Hi, Vibert. Thank you very much. I wanted to talk a little bit about like Starbuck Fantasy, which you have not mentioned.
No, I did. I mentioned it, but not.
Okay, but there was, if you mentioned it, this was street theater, and that was the period in which Philip Moore came to be known and come from the quarantine. So there was that mixture of music and art. And they produced this magazine called Artana, which was Helen Tate. But prior to that, the Scarra Lodge was the first Philharmonic Orchestra of Guyana. And then you had the one that was in Queenstown with Louis LaRoche, Princessville, right, Orchestra. And Ruby McGregor, of course, who was an important part of New Amsterdam.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so that she was quite an important music teacher for many in Guyana.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think you were exactly fair to the women. This is
but you know that piece about Helen Tate, not only Starbuck Fantasy with Amity Parker, you know, when she brought together the young Turks, the Stanley Greaves', you know, the painters, the musicians, the dancers, together to create. You know, when I mentioned musical theater, you know, in my book I amplified on that. But Helen does a very interesting piece, The Future is Bright, in 1957, which after the PVP returns to office, she does this piece called The Future is Bright, which kind of speaks to the future. And what was interesting, that the lead guy, his name was Guy, and his girlfriend, her name was Anna. So when Guy and Anna got together, he was projecting this whole New Guyana thing, you know. So yeah, Helen also gives us a lot of information about the internal workings of the Americans here, because her job, her first job, was working with the people who were constructing Atkinson Field. And she was one of the first people who sang at the USO. USO at that point of time was operating under US segregationist laws. So people of color were not supposed to go inside there.
Well, she wasn't allowed to dance in shoes on points.
Yeah.
In ballet when she went up to New York at that period. Yeah. But she also, I think that period in which there was this kind of very strong nationalist for what the New Guyana would be like, was very much retained throughout that whole house. And when Michael Jukes did Couvade,
that's right.
There was very much the same kind of expression of this real world that we could, you know, produce.
And in that same neighborhood, you had in Upper Murray Street a very interesting place called Itabu, which Steve DiCastro. This is where Guyana's beatnik culture is going to emerge. And this is where Ram John Holder is going to create them call me them boy. You know, that LP comes out of that period. So what I attempted to do was to take a particular piece and use that as a point of departure. But, you know, yes, ma'am.
Dr. Cambridge, I was absolutely thrilled at this presentation. And I'm feeling that the next steps will have to be marking this very presentation as itself a historic moment, because I don't think this has ever been done before in Guyanese history. It's a reflectiveness that I think the younger generation at this point in Guyana's history really, really need. And I would hate to see this presentation locked up in a textbook, which they cannot access.
Well, the good word is that sometime next week, I'll continue a conversation with the Education Channel, the University of Guyana Center for Communication Studies.
It must be live. You must interact with the children face to face, flesh to flesh. And they must listen to the music, and they must understand the difference in the rhythm. Music is not just music, it is rhythm and sound, vibration.
All right.
Okay, so.
I surrender, as Matthew Allen would say, I surrender all. Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
And as a visually impaired teacher, I'm enjoying teaching music, but what I think, really it's a fact, it's a big problem of teaching children music now, because they don't really appreciate what the classical and so. They want their own music. But what I normally do is to take the young people music, you know, and put it into their likeness, just for them to get to really appreciate it. Now, I would like this calypso to really get in the airways, because I think it will be something good for the young people to really follow. They need something to, it's like, to remind them about their behavior and how they must take life. Younger, take your time. You're still in your prime. Them boys have them busy, pushing from a mining, baby. Education, take the world to the gospel. But them girls, they want to take the reverse. She get pregnant and she barely swell. She get out of school, she's her life in hell. I said, take your time, teenagers pregnant. It's a very nice.
the issue of access to broadcast, the airwaves, is a consistent problem in the story of music in Guyana. Who has access or who has had access to broadcasting? When you see the range of labels that Terry Nelson published under, because he said that when a Halagala got into the station, there would be an immediate reaction, okay, it ain't good. So you would change up the name. So Terry Nelson has a range of labels, similarly with Gems. So that's a big issue. I can't answer that. And in terms of your song, entertainment education is a very powerful strategy, so keep it. I encourage.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm told to ask one question. My name is Don Rome, sir.
I know you.
It's a pleasure having you in Georgetown. My colleague here, Mr. Dave Martin, in a really wonderful piece of scripture, almost scripture, said to me in the privacy of my home that Guyana is coming back. Do you sort of believe that through music and the wonderful archives that you're going to create will bring some of that back?
Well, I would want to say a little bit more. I've been spending the last 2 weeks on the University of Guyana's campus, meeting with all the various faculty units on that campus. And I must say that there's a spirit of do it, a spirit that it is possible, a spirit of despite their constraints and odds that they're moving forward afoot.
Thank you very much.
My question was Eddy Grant. I didn't see him mentioned. And I know there's the whole thing about the ring band. Was he? Well, we missed it. Sorry. The whole ring band culture and so on. So I did miss it. So sorry.
Okay, not Eddy. Eddy is not. Eddy. Not that I didn't mention Eddy. Eddy stands like a colossus. You know, there's a centerpiece. He's the first Guyanese to be defined as our musical heritage group. There's a stamp on Eddy. And Eddy is also the end piece of the book, because in the 20th century, you know, if you've got Peter Mortimer, the Weaver, 1901. In 1999, in that concert that went around the world, the Ring Band concert from Tobago, it was headlined by Eddy Grant. It was seen by 2 billion people. So Eddy is in there. It's the parsimony of this moment that I didn't
Okay.
This is the City Guyana group right in front here. You did some phenomenal work, right? Phenomenal work. In 6 weeks to make some world-class movies, starting to win prizes and stuff like that. So you're talking about a cultural industry. And if you're to support a cultural industry, right, you need to create the environment that not only protects it, but ensures that you could distribute it, generate the income safely. A group that you should look at is Cross Color. Cross Color has probably the most advanced online marketing presence. So it is a complex thing. You also got some very innovative merchandising elements in Guyana. When we're talking about music in 20th century Guyana, the music cart. You know, although it's selling bootleg thing, I think it's a fantastic music distribution system. You know, they may be selling all the Bugarini, you know, music, but so it's a larger conversation, not only copyright protection, but you know, that's why the cultural industry supported grants. You know, it's should the private sector be investing? You know, if the private sector start to invest in the cultural industry, you bet you're going to see traction. But if it remains a one-off, individual, Vanity Fair, you know, I want to make a record, you know, I want to make a music, and then you come around and you try to hawk it, you're going to get stiff. You know, for example, there's some Dr. Lunk produced one of the definitive bits of Guyana history, 100 years of the classical music of the Americas. You know, that is so powerful. You know, that is so powerful.